Sure.
Okay, I think it's on now. Okay. So just let me know if you don't see us. But I think we're live. All right. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and start. Let me know if you don't see us. Okay, Ned?
Okay.
Cool. Yeah, we're on.
Okay.
Good.
Hello, members of the Art of Healthy Authentic Marriages. Today we are tackling another wonderful topic for our weekly live stream. And we're actually kicking off a 5-part series of losing strategies that we're going to be talking about for the next 5 weeks. And these losing strategies are highlighted in the work of Terry Real in his book, The New Rules of Marriage. And really what he did is he sort of identified the 5 most common losing strategies that come up in relationships that cause really unhealthy patterns and keep people stuck, and really preventing them from being able to connect deeply and break out of unhealthy fighting patterns or shutting down or avoidance and all that stuff. So these are the most common, and a lot of them are actually considered completely acceptable in our culture. So that's why they're so common, but they're really not useful. In fact, they're dysfunctional and extremely damaging to marriages. So these behaviors, we wanted to talk about these because these are the ones that are the most important to stop doing in your relationship and your marriage, because they ultimately will lead to divorce. And, you know, you can't remain connected with each other and intimate and on the same team with each other if you're engaged in these behaviors. So we want to highlight these, talk about what to look out for, how to be aware that this is happening, because we don't want you to end up getting divorced when you really actually love each other and you've been fighting the good fight for a long time, but you just can't seem to break out. So this is going to hopefully help you a lot. The first one we're going to tackle is the need to be right. And I would say this is one of the biggest ones that we see. I see this like multiple times a day.
Yeah, we all do. Yeah.
Right? All the time.
Yeah.
And it's because it's so embedded in our culture, the need to be right. Because if you think about it, successful debating, successful making a point in our culture is really based on this premise that you have to deconstruct the validity of someone else's point of view or their argument in order to be right. That's like a win, right? You have to make somebody else wrong in order to be right. And this is a losing strategy. Obviously, the reason it's called that is because if you do that, you will ultimately never get what you want.
Right.
You're kind of caught between a short-term gain of being right versus the long-term gain of actually having a happy marriage. So the very thing that you're attached to, and let's face it, we've all been guilty of this, is ironically a guarantee to failure in your connection. Yeah. So, and Terry Real talks about this. He says, you know, in answer to the question, who's right, when people are arguing, who's right, the answer is, who cares? Do you want to be right or do you want to be married?
Yeah, definitely.
And you can both be right. And there is no objective truth in a marriage. And we're going to talk more about that in a minute. But first, we're going to kind of break down 7 ways that this need to be right shows up so that you can really recognize this in your specific dynamic and be on the lookout for it. We're going to talk about why it's so damaging. And then we're going to go over 6 things that you can do to break out of this need to be right or to just get out of that habit.
Yeah.
So the first thing, and I want to just mention, of course, I'm here with my coaches today, Kelly and Ned Vandiver, who are going to tackle this with me. And I'm just going to start with the first thing that I see all the time. The way that this shows up, the need to be right, is the tendency to want to like argue your point until your partner, you're not satisfied unless your spouse sees the rightness of your position. Like you want to convince them. Your energy and your effort and all of your tactics are spent on trying to get them to see the rightness of where you're coming from.
Yeah.
To see it your way. And if they are still talking about their point of view, you want to keep saying your point of view, and then they keep saying their point of view, and you never get anywhere because you're not able to move past it because you feel like you haven't succeeded in getting that one, like, oh, I get it. Okay, now we can agree. This is true.
Yeah.
You really want to get to that like singular reality.
Yeah. Well, well, like you said, it goes back to this objective reality that we all hold. Yeah. Because, you know, we're looking at things just from our perspective, and you forget a lot of times when you're in a relationship, it's really important that you support your partner in what they see also, because there are two realities, and so you have to honor them in that. And otherwise, like you said, you're fighting the losing battle.
Yeah.
And you stay stuck and you spend so much time and energy. No, but it's this way. Yeah, but what about this way? Yeah, but this way. And then it's like, what's the point? You want to get to a point where you're like, okay, I see that. I see this. Now what?
Yeah. Right. So you want to reach a collaboration. Yeah.
How do we just say A is true, B is true? And maybe your reality is not true for me. My reality is not true for you, but it is what it is. Let's accept that. And let's not judge each other. Let's just move forward and collaborate, right? But
Exactly.
the idea of needing to convince is, like you say, Ned, is really fueled by the assumption that there is an objective reality.
Right.
And there's another assumption that I see underneath that, which is we oftentimes believe that we can't be connected to our partner or that we can't collaborate with our partner unless we see things the same way. For me, anyway, I've had a stake in getting my husband to see things my way because I think, well, if he doesn't see it this way, then what does that mean for our future? Then we're not going to be on the same team. How can we work together if we see it differently? And that's not necessarily true, but I think that assumption of like, we're not going to be on the same team if we can't see it the same way. And that's a myth.
Yeah. I mean, you didn't, when you met one another.
You go there in those moments of being triggered. And that's the other thing too, is the meaning we make out of everything, right? Like, it's like, oh, if we don't both agree on this the same way, then, oh my gosh, that's just it.
Well, then we just can't be together because
we're never going to be on the same team.
Yeah. That's so common, right?
Yeah, definitely.
I've done that.
Oh, me too.
Yeah.
We all have.
It is a lie in your head. It is such a losing strategy. It's a total loser to need to be right.
Mm-hmm.
It is. Because
so you find yourself convincing your spouse and you're not able to let it go because they're not seeing it from your point of view. Catch yourself. You gotta be aware of that and remember, okay, maybe we can move on and still work together in spite of the fact that I'm not able to convince them of my reality.
Yeah. Right. There's two realities. There's my reality and then there's my husband's reality. And it just boils down to, okay, well, seeing it that way or seeing it the way you see it, I could kind of see that, I could understand that. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. And even if we don't understand it, we accept it.
Exactly.
We'll talk about that too when we are tackling sort of the solutions and different ways of thinking about this that will help you get out of this. But in terms of identifying how this shows up, there's another way that this shows up too, is if maybe you guys have noticed when your spouse doesn't see it your way, or if the other way around, you don't see it the way they want you to see it, that there can be some self-righteous indignation.
Oh, definitely.
Right? How do you guys see this show up?
Well, for me, if you get pissed off or annoyed at someone, and rather than you acknowledging and going, okay, like you said, it goes back to number one. If I first can't acknowledge the fact that you have a difference of opinion about something, and I'm seated in the place that the only thing I'm going to do is deconstruct your belief, I'm going to find ways to support that. So I'm going to build references around how I can tear you down. So that's where the self-righteous indignation begins to show up. Rather than
that look though. How can you tell when somebody's being?
It looks like this. Instead of you just kind of being angry inside of yourself and just being angry
or frustrated.
You start calling names like you're a freaking jerk. You're a freaking. You know what? Can I curse on camera, Monika?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just kidding. I'm not going to. Children watching. But, instead of just thinking, right, or being angry, you're emoting, you're becoming the anger itself, and usually lashing out on, the person that you claim to love, right? So,
yes. And
self-righteous
another,
indignation.
yes, that's such a great example where it's like, it's not just that you're frustrated and angry, it's that you really feel like they don't have the right to see it that way, or you're judging them. So like this comes up a lot. How could you even think that? I just don't understand how you could even think that. Like that is just so awful. It's like there's this tone of like, that's a self-righteous indignation. Like that is just so wrong, and I can't even believe it, and I don't even know what to make of you as a human being because you
Yes. Yeah. Shows up like that too.
Yeah.
Super judgy.
Yeah.
What else, you guys?
Well, I mean, I say another one is deflecting onto your partner, in defense, which is a natural defense mechanism usually, because, we're all generally, it's a knee-jerk reaction, it's from our adaptive child. So you have a tendency to place the blame on your partner a lot of times around situations that both of you need to hold some responsibility around, but it's easier for me to go, this is your fault, and I didn't have anything to do. I told you this was going to happen. And that's a primary example of some of the way the situation.
Another one is it sounds like, well, you made me do that. I did that because, you were, pissing me off. So you made me do it.
Yeah.
Instead of owning you did it, it sounds like it's your fault. It's your fault. My life is the way that it is. This isn't how I saw my life turning out. And it's your fault that my life is like this,
Which you wouldn't have to deflect if you didn't believe that there was only one right way to look at it. So if you didn't feel that need to be right, you'd be able to hear what they're saying and not have a need to deflect.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right? Deflection.
And you gave some examples too of like how kids do it.
Yes. So I have it written down here. So kids exhibit this behavior, like if they spill something, if something spills, and they'll blame it on the cup. Like it's the cup's fault. The cup spilled. Or they'll blame it on the sibling. So-and-so did it, Or, so-and-so don't do that. And it's like, so-and-so does it. Right a minute ago, And so they can't, it's like they can't look at themselves, and it goes from childhood all the way on up to adulthood, because adults do it every day, right? When we're living in that adaptive child part of our brains, we're not able to own things like a mature adult. And that's where the deflection comes in.
Right. Because if you don't feel like if you don't have the need to be right, you have the ability to be like, oh, I made a mistake.
Right. Yeah. And it's as simple as that,
Yep.
Yeah.
And another defense is projection, right? How does that show up?
It's slightly nuanced. To me, it's like a form of deflection, but it's like when you are something or you be something, or
you have certain qualities inside
something, and that it's like not a part of your identity that you want to be a part of your identity. So instead of facing it, instead of owning it, instead of looking at it, you will literally, it's like you'll blame other people, or you'll
see it in others, right?
You'll see it in other people. Yeah, you'll call it out. So like, for instance, and I wrote this down, like, for, people who are really rude, like just rude people. We all know rude people. They go around talking about everyone else, saying everyone else is rude. I know someone like that, and she is so, and she talks about how rude everyone else is. You know what I mean? Like, because again, it's like you can't own it. You know what I mean? Like you're basically dissociating from a part of you that you don't like, but
pointing to it in others and saying, that's not me. I don't like that. But
Right.
you can only say you don't like it by pointing to it in others, not by looking at it in yourself. So that's what projection, and I feel like that is sort of like bred in an environment where you need to be right. Like, it's, if you believe that it's okay to be wrong, first of all, or if you believe that it's okay to make mistakes and nobody has to be right, and somebody else being right doesn't make you wrong, if you can get past that false, way of thinking, then there's less of a need for projection.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what projecting does, though, it creates a false sense of just a false sense of, like you're saying, being right. Some people find strength in it. It's a false strength, but they find it. It's why they do it.
It's ego.
Yeah. They don't have the sense of mind or the presence to really look at themselves, and they don't want to a lot of times. And that's a huge problem.
It's an adaptive child response.
Yeah, it's a huge problem.
It's a coping mechanism. And for people who've not learned how yet, the skills and the tools to stay in that prefrontal cortex, that adult brain, right? The mature, grounded part of yourself.
Yeah.
So,
and the reason this is so damaging is it really starts to confuse boundaries. People start to get confused, like, is it me? Is it them? What's really going on here? And it also, because when you're deflecting and projecting, you're not taking ownership. You are actually decreasing authentic connection. First of all, you can't be an empowered co-creator of your relationship when you're doing those things. And you also can't connect authentically and deeply on an emotional level with your spouse. So that's why these are so damaging.
Yeah.
And so, because it sounds like really abstract, right? We're using these psychological terms, but in real time, in the real moment in your relationship, when this is happening, you're causing a lot of pain. You're causing a lot of hurt in the relationship. You're creating an environment that is not full of trust.
Right.
It's hard to trust your partner when they're projecting and they can't see it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because like you said, there's so many times I'm on a call, with a person, and they're discussing the problem with me, and then they stop and they ask me, "Is it me?" Yeah,
right.
It happens so often that somebody goes, "I don't know if it's me or not," and that's exactly what you said. It creates that big question mark around. It throws so many variables in there that don't exist.
Yeah, like, what is really going on?
Yeah. So that was a really good point.
Yeah. Another one is, I love this one, condescending superiority. That's another way that this shows up. And this is really just when one or both people
that one.
You're guilty of that one?
Yeah.
That's what is that? Explain more about that then, from your point of view, when you've experienced that condescending superiority in the need to be right.
So I, am a recovering need to be right flavored person. And so the condescending superiority is when you're talking to your partner and they've triggered you, or you're pissed about something, and you're like deflecting onto your partner and just using this really condescending tone. Like, for me, like, for instance, like,
it's really contemptuous.
Yeah, it's contemptuous. It's like to make them feel less than or stupid or something. And it's just a total dick move. You know what I mean? Like, all right, it is. And we Ned and I have probably done it to each other. I mean, we not very often, but it's happened. And it's
them like they don't understand. They just don't understand. Like, they're not smart enough.
Really, you don't understand that? Do you need me to explain it?
Yeah, what world do you live in?
Yes. That's a really common one. What world do you live in? Are you kidding me? Really?
Yeah.
That kind of attitude. And treating the other person like they don't have the same depth. And
Exactly.
and it's a put down, and obviously that causes damage because it creates defensiveness, it creates shame, and it certainly doesn't create collaboration.
No. No.
And this isn't always conscious, right? Just to say, like, when this happens, it's not that we think people are trying to purposely be that way to each other. Like, sometimes people are aware of it, sometimes they're not. Sometimes people go right into that sarcasm or that condescension without recognizing it.
Yeah, and I wonder why.
Really be aware.
Yeah, I wonder why. If you think about your childhood, a lot of times, that dialogue often sounds like maybe a parent.
Yeah.
Talking to you.
And exactly, because sarcasm.
Yeah.
Can be a weapon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Especially if you're protecting against your own shame, right?
Yeah.
Another thing is that there's oftentimes when people are needing to be right, it will show up as a refusal to listen or to hear or feel or understand your partner. It's just like a refusal to receive their point of view. You don't even want to consider it because in some way you think that that's minimizing the rightness of your position. Right? It's really attached to your own version of reality.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's when you're just like digging your heels in and you're just like, nope. I mean, that is truly, when you refuse to see your partner's point of view, you can be sure that you are in a very childlike part of your brain and you're operating from there. You are triggered. You need to go inward and figure out what is going on with you. If you are so attached to your story and your reality and you cannot come outside yourself and listen to another side, you definitely need to look at that.
Yeah.
Well, exactly, because you won't be able to grow. You won't be able to connect. It hurts the other person.
You're not able to communicate at all.
Mm-hmm. Right. And the empathy piece, it kills empathy.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, like you always talk about, Monika, if you're not adding to, you're detracting from. Mm-hmm. And what happens is you begin to see a breakdown, not only in your communication, it begins to show up in different areas, sex, just all the key areas that need to be really strong in order for you to have a healthy relationship. It begins to show up that way.
Yeah. Because if you don't, your partner will shut down on you. Like they won't even try to talk to you anymore because they'll just assume they're not going to hear me.
Exactly.
What's the point of this is when people get avoidant or when they shut down or when they start stonewalling or when they withdraw completely and they've given up. That happens a lot. And so you don't want that to happen because that is actually a big predictor. When somebody is shut down that much, that's a predictor of divorce.
Right.
And the research has shown that.
And I want to point this out too, because this is just a nuance of what I've seen happen also, is so many times because of all the beliefs that we do have and the limiting beliefs that we've got, especially when it comes to our partners, that, we all sort of have this, negative core image of our partners when we get triggered and they piss us off. But so much of this thing, a form of like refusing to hear your partner is allowing yourself to get triggered in the moment and then coming from a place of expecting
the worst and expecting your partner to be like the worst version of themselves. And those are the beliefs that cause people to refuse to listen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, like you're looking at them through a certain lens and you're kind of boxing them in as this is the kind of person that they are.
Yeah.
So
and yet
really hearing them.
Yeah, and then you begin to call it forth.
Right, and you end up creating your own reality.
Yeah.
Because it's a cycle, right? Like what your belief is in the beginning will absolutely get you what you believe in the end. I mean, it's like circle. That's why so many of you find yourselves going round and round in the same circle over and over again, because you're caught up in these cycles that aren't necessary. They're just not necessary.
No.
Once you wake up to them.
Yep, right. And it's really freeing once you let it go. And we're going to share that in a moment, about what you can actually do to break out of this. The last thing we're going to touch on in terms of how this shows up, sadly, is that when you really are, I see this again and again, and when people cannot give up their need to be right, it leads to separation and it leads to divorce.
Yeah.
And it's devastating and it's sad because it's not a reflection on how much somebody loves each other, you know, or a couple loves each other. It's not a reflection on how committed they actually are, because they might still be fighting and they're fighting the good fight. But if you're still hammering away on the need to be right in the work on the relationship, because a lot of people say, well, we're working on it, we're talking about it, we're trying. But if you're still entrenched in that needing to be right in the work on the relationship and you're not able to get past it, ultimately it breaks down marriages.
Yeah.
Because it blocks connection. So that's what's so sad, is that just the long-term compatibility of a marriage, or the sustainability of a marriage, really comes from being able to learn the new skills that you need to be able to break out of this, and then the other losing strategies that we're going to be talking about down the line.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So what can we advise people to do? Like we have talked about this, but we're not going to be able to go into it, you know, completely, like write a book on it. But we do have 6 things that we want to share with you about what you can do to break out of this need to be right. And because you might have a need to be right, or maybe your spouse has a need to be right, or maybe you both do, but you can share this with your spouse too if they are guilty of this as well.
Yeah.
So what do you guys think is the number one thing that you would recommend?
The first step is admitting you have the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So like the first step
Waking up.
is waking up to it. Like if you have this problem of, and you suffer from the need to be right, then wake up to it. Own it, swallow your pride, shelf your ego. In marriage, there's no place for ego, right? There's just not. I mean, being in a partnership is about being in this mature, loving, compassionate place and space, sharing space with another human being, your partner. And, you know, if you suffer from this, the first step is to wake up to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And there's no shame in admitting it, you know?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you're a horrible person. Like our culture really perpetuates this.
Yeah, it does.
And
like
it's deeply embedded.
Yeah, like you talk about all the time. We're kind of, it's almost like we're trained with these defenses in mind, but not, again, the strategies work well if you're in war, you know, to go to these places. But when you're in an intimate relationship, they're definitely not the platform you want to, have at your helm when you're trying to build something constructively healthy. It definitely doesn't work, you know.
Yes, that's such a good point, because what is considered like success in some areas of corporate America or